I have been traveling very, very long time, and this has led us to exploring the topic of circadian rhythms and effects on human physiology. And you have elaborated many, many times that it's not about just sleep and wake cycles. What the hell really is it? So, what are the basics of circadian rhythms, and what does it actually affect, regulate, and why it could be more important than not to have some kind of structure? Uh, we know very well that people who have shift work are more or less at higher risk of all kind of stuff. So
Yeah,
what's happening there? Why it is happening? What can we do about it? Let's dig deep into this first.
yeah. So first, let's define it, right? Circadian rhythm is not when you go to sleep and when you wake up. Circadian rhythms is the timing mechanisms at each of your cells, and their ability to communicate effectively what time it is in their zip code, in their time zone, compared to another part in your body. So the best analogy that you can come up with this, or that I can come up with this, is something to do with physics, right? Like everybody knows that one day on the planet Mars is not the same length of time as one day on planet Earth, and with every
Yeah, you
planet
developed
on
it
every
every
star.
time.
Yeah. So at the scale, at the planetary scale, it's very easy to understand that. Okay, obviously, this time of day on Earth is not the same as on Mars. And then within planet Earth, there is also time zones. For example, right now it's 7 a.m. for me and it's 2 p.m. for you. But we can coordinate because we can tell each other what time it is at each one of our zones, and we can coordinate to get on here and do this Zoom call. That is essentially circadian rhythm. It's your brain being able to know what time it is in there and being able to communicate it effectively with the time of your liver, with the time of your lungs, with the time of your heart, with the time of your pancreas, and with the time of your pinky toe, and all the cells there. Because see, each cell is its own individual, just like its own zip code. And then your mitochondria within each cell are like the workers in that cell, which they technically are. They're providing all the energy for the cell, but they need to all be able to coordinate. Hey, it's this time here and this time here. Are we supposed to be lining up with other people on other parts of the universe, right? That is your body, right? Because that's the way you got to think about it. Hey, the universe that's happening in my head and at my brain level is a completely different time stamp and time zone than the universe happening at my kidneys, for example, right? And so that is what circadian rhythm is. It's the timing of all your different time zones within your universe of your body. Now, what can they affect, right? And essentially the answer is everything, right? Because they're
Well, we've
not
seen this in
one
my
part
blood
of.
test, because every time I travel, when I come back home, my blood test is just horrendous.
Yeah, everything kind of gets messed up, right? Certain things actually get messed up because it's reacting to certain things, and other parts of the blood tests don't get messed up, right? And that's going to be genetically individual to that person, because when you look at a comprehensive blood test, you're actually looking at organ systems, right? And how they're communicating with each other. For example, let's just back it up and take it to a blood test. Glucose is telling you what's happening at the blood, glucose in your blood. Fasted insulin is telling you what's happening at your pancreas. So what is the pancreas doing in reaction to that glucose? And then A1C is having a historical dance between the two. It's giving you the history of what those two have been doing over the past 100 days. So you can quickly see, okay, what are the things that can affect the glucose in the blood? Well, most people right away think about the food that they're putting in their mouth. But if you think about, okay, well, you have a built-in mechanism in your eye to produce glucose as well through ACTH. Well, that means, it's also, your blood glucose is also telling you how much artificial light you're letting into the eye. then it's also letting you know, oh, how is the liver reacting to that? Because the liver is what releases the glucose into the blood. So it's also telling you about the liver. You see what I'm saying? Immediately, when you look at a blood test, now what you really should be thinking is, how are things being coordinated, or are they not coordinated very well? Right. And then that's where some markers are off and they're concerning, where other markers are off and they're actually not concerning because they're reacting correctly. For example, when you travel, you tend to have really high prolactin that comes up. Your prolactin itself, and this is not abnormal. You should have, everybody, even men, should have a prolactin pulse in the middle of the night. And prolactin as a cellular hydrator, that's action number one. That's the reason why both sexes have prolactin. Most people associate prolactin with lactation, which it does do, but that's in females. And that's when it's surging all the time at specific intervals. But its actual primary function is to hydrate tissues. So when you travel, your body actually raises prolactin to keep you hydrated. That's a protective mechanism for a dehydration event. Not everybody will react that way. That's actually a positive reaction to the travel, right? In that context. Now, if you weren't traveling and you really high prolactin, that could end up as a big negative, but it's not. We've kind of troubleshot it with you and associated with, well, this actually kind of really only happens when you travel. And then you go step back and you go, okay, when you travel, what's going on? Well, there's cellular dehydration going on. There is the lack of rhythm for other organ systems to create hydration by itself. So what is your body doing? It's raising one of its hormones that creates hydration independently of other vectors to protect you against that event. You're actually probably one of the lucky individuals that your body does that well and doesn't affect other parts of your psyche, right? Like, or at least not to a degree that you can notice. Whereas other people might not get that benefit. Their prolactin might not go up. So they actually do end up dehydrated if they do a lot of traveling. Or if their prolactin would go up, it maybe ticks up other hormones along with it. So that is, in essence, what circadian rhythm is how all your organ systems are able to keep in sync, kind of to the tune of how modern day has kind of moved the human race of, hey, everything's on Zoom meetings, people are in different time zones in different countries, etc. And we get good at coordinating with each other. Hey, it's this time at my time. What time is it at your time? Let's sync up correctly. That is what circadian rhythm is, but your body biology has perfected this to the nth degree. Not only because the scale is so small, right? Like when we think of time zone, your time zone and my time zone, we're talking the human scale, right? But when we talk about the time zone in the brain and the time zone at the liver, for example, we're talking about microseconds, right? The coordination needs to be coordinated that well. It needs to be microseconds of precision. And the more precision there is, the better your circadian rhythm, right? So that's another concept that not a lot of people talk about is, okay, so I'm working on my circadian rhythm. What actually makes it better, right? What makes it better? The answer to that question is the more periodicity. So in other words, if you have a really finely made watch, it can tick down to the microseconds, whereas not a very well made watch will only tick down at the 1 second mark, right? So that's the difference between a really high quality stopwatch and a not so high quality stopwatch. When you hit stop, how many zeros? How much of a scale do you get? In circadian biology, the bigger the scale, so the more fine your fine tuning is, the better the circadian rhythm is. The thing that makes periodicity go up in biology of the timing of the cells is how good your eye functions with your brain. That's the first cog in this whole system. The second cog in this whole system is how well your skin functions with your brain. And the third cog is how well your gut functions with your brain. So those are the three most important organs that need to be at the highest periodicity with the brain, right? Everybody kind of says, hey, the brain does everything, right? And it is kind of the central controller, but it needs these three other organ systems to have perfect periodicity with it: the skin, the gut, and the eyes. If one of those three is disturbed, your periodicity goes down, right? So then that will manifest in some kind of disease, right? Maybe not necessarily right away, but the timing is off. When the timing is off, over time, it gets more off, right? Like if your clock, right? If you never told me, hey, it's 2 p.m. where you're at, and you just tell me it's the afternoon, right? So I'm going to assume, okay, 7 a.m., it's the afternoon for Juris, wherever he lives. But he didn't tell me a precise time. So next time we get on, I go, okay, well, sometime in the morning, it'll be the afternoon for him. So I'm just going to log on whenever the hell I want, and it'll be the afternoon. We may hit or miss, and more often than not, we'll probably line up within a half an hour. But over time, your time will be different from what I'm expecting because there wasn't precision. You see what I'm saying? That is what ends up happening when circadian rhythm is disrupted. The precision between organ systems talking to each other and lining up correctly at the right time of day gets disrupted. So why did I say those three? The eye, the skin, and the gut? Because the eye, number one, is what's going to tell the brain the most precise information. We have really, really, really good eyesight for pattern recognition, for daylight recognition. Like humans have pretty damn good eyesight, and we're very eye dominant. Our eyes are even positioned differently than other animals so that we can clearly tell depth perception and all. It gives us a lot of information, but the biggest information that it gives us is information that we can't actually see. We have detectors right behind that are detecting UV light, minute amounts of UV light that are coming in, infrared light, and the oxygen at the place that we're living. Because your eyes, the cornea, specifically in the pupil, there's no blood vessels there, or in the middle of the eye, there's no blood vessels there. So it doesn't get oxygen directly through blood vessels. It gets oxygen from just being exposed to the air. So it's literally measuring oxygen density at the air. So if you live at high latitude, they're going to sense less oxygen. Low latitude, more oxygen. So there's a lot of information being relayed from your eye to the brain to tell it exactly where you are at on the planet. Then the skin confirms or unconfirms the situation of, is this correct or not, by temperature sensing. That's one of its main functions. And then it does a lot of other things in the collection of sunlight, wavelengths of sunlight that we don't necessarily see, like UV light and IR light and things of that nature. Then the gut reinterprets that same information by the food or the substances that we're putting in our mouth. Those also, for example, if I were to get a banana, right? I'm in Colombia and I grab a banana, that banana will be integrated with all the sunlight information from that region. When I put it in my mouth, it'll be digested by the bacteria in my gut. Those bacteria will let off light to correspond with what they've digested. So in other words, the light show that they give off is different depending on the structures that they're digesting. So that gives more information because that light gets displayed on our gut. And that's what tells our gut to open and close. And we've talked about this with our leaky gut video. I'm kind of wrapping all these videos into one. That gut will open and close depending on the light show that it gets from the thing that got digested. And that is directly relayed through the brain gut axis, the vagus nerve, to the brain. So the brain has now collected information through the eye of where you're at, what time of day is it. It's collected information through the skin. How hot is it outside? How much hydration or dehydration is this person going to suffer? And then the food that you put in it then validates the location of where you're at. When that happens, everything runs correctly. It's almost like a three-tier system that's double checking the assumption, right? The rule number one in biology is the moment it starts assuming that, it means that the timing is going to be off. So when there's less assumptions, the timing becomes more periodized. So if the eye is registering high amounts of light and your skin is registering lots of UV and heat, and you fed it something that grows in high sunlight environment, hunky-dory. There's no immune system disruption. There's no hormone disruption, and you're good to go. Now, things that will mess it up is things of, hey, I live indoors and I don't get very strong sunlight. So your eyes are now interpreting a dim lit environment, but your skin is not confirming that because your temperature is static, right? And now you feed it a banana, and now that's a high sunlight food, but your eye and your skin aren't really sure if it's in a high sunlight environment. That can tell your brain, hey, we're not quite sure if this thing that this person put in its stomach is supposed to be here. We might need to react to it. So its immune system is coded slightly different, and it can possibly give you an immune system reaction. So that's a way to explain how when these things start to go off, your body kind of starts to fight itself a little bit. Any
Yeah,
questions so far?
to me, it's like, okay, we kind of know when you wake up, you need to be your high cortisol. When you go to bed, you want your T4 and GH release and all this kind of stuff. Is there some kind of best setup for when to release what kind of hormones and how we can get to that point through changing our lifestyle habits?
Yes. So now we'll fine tune some of the circadian rhythm function, right? So let's start at night, because night is the thing that gets disrupted the most in modern living, right? So ideally, you experience night very similar to how I'm in this environment right now. The sun hasn't come up yet, so I haven't turned on a bunch of bright lights yet or anything like that. But in the nighttime, when the sun goes down, ideally your environment should get dimmer than what it was during the day, right? That doesn't always happen, and that's why I'm starting here. If it gets dimmer, especially in the sense of blue light, intense blue and white light entering the eye, then your central climactic nucleus interprets that as nighttime. The first thing that will start to be released is melatonin. Melatonin will raise and start to make you groggy. It will actually put you to bed, not the other way around. See, in this day and age, we put ourselves to bed. We go, oh, it's 9 o'clock, so I need to get to bed, so I go to bed. Where previously, before there was artificial light at night, that's not how it worked. It basically, you got groggy and you went to bed. Your body put you to bed, not the other way around. And that is through that melatonin action. Melatonin is a signaling hormone telling your body how much damage you've incurred throughout the day. So all the reactive oxygen species that have been created throughout the day with all the activities that you've done and all of the interactions with the environment that you've had, those correlate with a specific amount of melatonin that should be released if blue light goes away at night. The magnitude of how much melatonin gets released will then be interpreted by several systems of the body, but mainly your brain, on how much deep sleep, light sleep, and REM sleep you should be getting. And through those phases, certain phases will be where certain amount of thyroid hormone, T4 to be specific, will be released. Also, when total testosterone will be made, and then when growth hormone will be spiked. And that's actually pulsatile throughout the night. That pulsatile nature is governed and dictate, like the magnitude of the pulses and the exact timing of how long those pulses last. That's dictated by this first hormone, melatonin, right? So one way to really mess it up right to begin with is a lot of blue light when there shouldn't be any. Right? I'm not saying don't turn on lights. I'm saying if you're somebody who has your computer screens on and all your lights on, and you easily make it to 11 or 12 p.m. every single evening, you're messing up that pulsatile nature, and you're probably circumventing enough melatonin that you're actually not getting the proper recovery when you do sleep. So a lot of people talk about, sleep is very important and you should get really good quality sleep, but nobody tells you what that means. They just tell you get enough sleep, right? Quality of sleep is direct relationship to how much melatonin you released at night. So you want good quality of sleep, make sure you lower the inputs that lower melatonin. And the biggest one is bright lighting. The biggest one is bright lighting by far.
That people can do in sense of maybe nutrition or maybe
yeah. So another thing that you want to do is, if you are having these types of, so let's take I'll say it and then we'll take a step back on how to diagnose it a little bit. If you are somebody who's having all these issues, with the hormones that I just stated, right? Like say, hey, you get a thyroid panel and your T4 is significantly underperforming compared to your T3. Well, that tells me it's a nighttime issue immediately because of what I just described. If you get tested and your free testosterone is kind of normal, but your total testosterone is underperforming, again, that goes back to a nighttime issue because that's when total testosterone is going to be manufactured. So right away, you can have some indicators in your blood work that tell you the problem is at night. So things that you can do to amplify this effect. Getting cold in the evening will also signal a bigger melatonin release, and making sure that you plan a time when you're going to be in bed. Say, let's just say, for example, I need to be in bed by 10 o'clock. Okay. Then I would say the steps that you would want to take from a nutritional standpoint is don't eat after 7 p.m. if your bedtime is 10 p.m. You want to have at least 2.5 to 3 hours of a gap there. The reason for that is this timing mechanism that I'm talking about. When your gut is digesting things, it's telling your brain that it's digesting things, right? It's giving it information of what to go in. But if you do it too close to bed, now you've occupied two things in the brain: the digestion process and the information coming in from the digestion process, and the process of it trying to release melatonin. You're starting to interfere. Doesn't mean that it can't do both. It just means that you can potentially not get the most that you could. So just making sure that you got a 3-hour gap between going to bed and your last meal is essential for, hey, the food is probably completely digested by then, and your brain can now effectively be as sensitive as possible to all of these things. Another hormone that we didn't talk about that also happens at night, or sends its best information at night, is leptin, right? So leptin is in your subcutaneous body fat layer, and it has to have interactions with cold or sunlight to be released into the bloodstream. At night, when you're asleep, literally or sometime around halfway through your sleep cycle, is when it should enter the hypothalamus and tell the body, this is how much energy this person has on it. And if it has enough, you wake up with enough energy, right? You don't wake up lethargic. You don't wake up like you're starving to death, or vice versa. If you're really skinny and starving to death, then leptin, the lack of leptin, is going to literally wake you up hungry and ready to eat more, and possibly cause other things like driving your NEAT down, your non-exercise activity down, things of that nature. That hormone gets interrupted when there's high amounts of insulin. So it can, so let me repeat that so people are clear. Leptin cannot enter your hypothalamus when insulin is high, because insulin signals some kind of a daylight activity. You're going to be eating sometime during the day, insulin will be high. If you're not eating and you are outside, sometime in the middle of the day, you're going to get blue light stimulation, which will raise insulin. So it's basically insulin is going to be there to stop leptin from entering at the wrong time of day, right? Because it wants to know how much activity is left, how much energy is left at the end of an active day. So the best time to do that is right in the middle of your sleep when you're not active. But if insulin is high, it's not going to let leptin in. So eating close to bed will circumvent that. Having a lot of blue light into the eye. So for example, you have to work, right, on a computer or whatever, and you work all the way up until 10 p.m. and then you shut down your computer, brush your teeth, and try to get in bed. Well, there was a lot of blue light entering your eye right up until that point. That means insulin will be slightly elevated off of baseline. You're probably going to be stimulated to the point where it takes a little while for you to fall asleep. And melatonin will not be raised until 90 minutes after blue light entered the eye, right? So you essentially set yourself up to not interpret leptin correctly and not release all those nighttime hormones correctly. So that little act of the evening, if you start to change it, right, to some of the things that I just mentioned, hey, eat 3 hours before, dim down the lighting. If you need to work on a computer, you use some blue light blocking glasses or software that turns your screen away from blue. Limit as much blue light as possible. Then what you start finding out is that people start getting put to sleep by their body, right? Like they're like, oh, 9:30 came around and I had a hard time keeping my eyes open, so I just went to bed. That's good. After several nights of that, what ends up happening is the right amount of hormone starts to be created in that nighttime first half scenario. They start waking up with more energy, which sets you up to do more of what we want you guys to do. Hey, you wake up, you go outside, you go for a walk, you eat some food, get a lot of shit done right off the bat that are good for your health because you're going to have the energy to do so. Now, we always talk about that, but this little hack that I just mentioned of start with what goes on in the evening sets you up for proper execution of all the stuff that should happen in the morning. Because the other thing that will happen is when you start getting up and getting outside in the morning, the next phase of those hormones that got created at night start to happen. So you made some testosterone at night. Well, in the morning with daylight, that's when testosterone gets converted to free testosterone, right? So the free version of testosterone is what happens in the morning. And the more you solidify the morning and giving the right information to the brain and the eye and the skin, hey, this is morning time. How does it know that? Because you went outside, your eyes interpreted, say, daylight, your skin interpreted the morning air, the morning temperature, and the gut, because if you feed it within the first hour or so with a high protein meal, you're also going to stimulate neurotransmitter production because of the high amounts of amino acids in the gut at that time. So you've triple reinforced that it's daytime when you woke up. So now the body has no question. This is in fact morning. We have all the things checked off. Let's spike testosterone into free testosterone. Let's take free T4 that got made in the evening and turn it over into free T3 in a pulsatile nature to wake this person up. And at that time, because T3 will go up, cortisol will go up, and that should keep you fueled and active for the first half of the day. And it should slowly drop off into the evening to again repeat the whole process. What you'll end up finding, so another hormone that can be on panels that can be disrupted is cortisol. That's the start of telling me if you've been messing up this circadian rhythm of this hormonal cascade, because cortisol should be peaked when you wake up and should be that way for about 4 to 5 hours and slowly trickle down into the afternoon. Most people have a peak in the middle of the day or into the evening when they've done disruption to their circadian rhythm for a long enough time. And long enough time is dictated of the amplitude of disruption. So in other words, you opened with people that work night shift have really bad health markers and actually have poor health outcomes in general. That's a very intense way to disrupt the circadian rhythm. A year or two of working night shift is enough to disrupt it very badly. Whereas if you just like to stay up late, right, and watch TV till midnight, it might take 5 or 6 years to disrupt it because it's not as big of a disruptor as a night shift, a full night shift, right? So the degree of disruption varies upon the degree of your lifestyle.
So what you mentioned about testosterone to be converted in free testosterone, it's probably going to trigger somebody who is into fasting. So do you want to touch up on that? What actually happens? And can it disrupt circadian rhythm at all? Or
Yes, yeah, absolutely it can. Yeah, fasting can absolutely disrupt because I just mentioned fasting is having to do with your gut, right? That's one of the 3 organ systems that need to be the most periodized as possible. Fasting during the day is not a great way to signal correct things. Like if you're going to fast, right? There's several ways to fast at and in fact, there's more and more research coming about. They don't call it fasting. They just call it time restricted eating, right? And the thing that they found is exactly what I'm about to say. If you put yourself a 10-hour window during the day, they've done this. That's the most effective. which doesn't, it's not that complicated. If you're a diurnal mammal, you're going to do most of your eating during the day. And that's what they find. They've even shifted that 10-hour window to, almost like the intermittent fasting type scenario where they skip breakfast and they eat at noon and they eat until 8 p.m. That does not work as effective as when you have a 10-hour eating window at sunrise and ends at sunset. Now, if you enjoy the fasting itself, right? Like, hey, when I don't eat, it gives me some level of control. It gives me some freedom to do shit that doesn't have to do with food and things of that nature. I get that, right? I do that. So if I was going to implement some form of fasting, what I would do is I would break my fast in the morning with a nice large meal, about 50% of my calories. Then I wouldn't eat anything until dinner time at about 6 or 7 p.m. and have the rest of your calories there, 50%. So now you actually have like a 12-hour window in the middle of the day where you fasted, and then another 12-hour window throughout the night where you're going to fast. So you're actually getting more fasting done, but you're actually tuning your circadian rhythm at the same time because you're not skipping breakfast and you're not skipping dinner. Those are the two crucial points that your body needs to understand in the time of day, right? Get outside, get some cold exposure, get a big meal in you. Immediately you've told your body, hey, it's time to wake up. It's time to produce all these things for daylight function. And then in the evening, you do it in reverse. You get outside, you'll experience a dimming effect from the environment outside. You come inside, you try to replicate it with as much as possible by dimming lights and things of that nature, or blue light blocking glasses. And then you eat your final meal that's about 3 hours before you're going to go to bed. You will immediately start getting bigger spikes in some hormones that are needed. You'll immediately start feeling more energized. Within a week of following that type of an intermittent fasting, you're going to get much, much further than trying to fast through the day. Now,
A lot of misconceptions.
go ahead.
Start
Go
day
ahead.
with their bulletproof coffee or amino acid shake or this and that, and you're like, yeah, that's not fasting. You're not doing fasting. You just use it.
No, you might as well consume some food with that and make it an actual helpful calorie ingestion, right? Like I don't have a problem with bulletproof coffee, right? Some fat in your coffee or coffee or just having a shake in the morning, but go all out and actually get a majority of your calories first thing in the morning. They're going to digest very quickly. And next thing you know, you're probably going to have a lot more energy for the rest of your day. And if you don't end up eating till dinner, then that's great. That's a win-win. You got a lot of activity done. You didn't consume a whole lot of calories, and you had plenty of energy to last through the whole day. That is a better scenario than, hey, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to cause even more stress to my body because I'm not feeding it. And
Yeah.
cortisol will go higher and higher and higher. See, people don't understand that is a crucial thing. When you do not eat, cortisol needs to stay higher. That's not necessarily a bad thing right at the beginning because cortisol mobilizes body fat, right? That's what people kind of teach of, well, if you skip the first half of the day, cortisol will continue to rise and release more body fat. That's great. Periodically, not a big deal. Chronically, that starts to become a big deal because eventually your body starts to move that cortisol response over throughout the day because you're
Yeah, that's
only
exactly what
eating.
we see is that people get results, and then no matter how long they fast, they can't lose anybody for them at all.
Yeah, because they've disrupted that cog. They've disrupted that biological circadian piece. And if you do it for long enough, eventually it starts to disrupt other things like sex hormones and other metabolism that goes on there, right? At first, no big deal, right? Like 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, you're probably going to get some good results. But when you all of a sudden adopt it as a lifestyle, you will run into issues over time because of that effect. You're messing with one of the cogs of your very sensitive circadian biology, and eventually you run out of runway. So knowing how to get back to baseline is probably the most crucial thing because it allows you to exploit small windows of time to do things like, hey, I'm going to fast all day long and lose extra body fat. If your circadian rhythm is intact, you will gain that benefit. Knowing that you can't do it forever is also a crucial part because you know now what the cogs of the circadian rhythm wheel need to begin with, and you reset them. Hey, this is the reset. This is the default setting. And then you run with that for a little while. make sure that everything's running good, and then you can do crazy transformations because your body's not messed up in the timing mechanisms.
Yeah, another thing I wanted to ask, is there anything apart from blood tests that people can do to kind of troubleshoot themselves? Is my circadian rhythm in sync with my body and my habits? So yeah, at a certain time might be useful, but is there something that people can pick up? Hey, maybe I wake up lethargic every single day. Maybe I don't go to bed. What other things are there?
Those would be some of the things, the biofeedback of, hey, when you go to bed, is your body putting you to bed, or are you going to bed? That's a crucial fundamental question to ask, because that tells me directly about melatonin. Hey, are you falling asleep? Like, hey, I'm groggy and I'm ready for sleep, and I go to sleep. If that's
and I
you,
go to bed to scroll through Instagram.
right, exactly. And then that's the next thing I do. Okay, when you go to bed, what is in the bedroom? Is the phone coming in with you? Is the computer, is a TV on in your bedroom? Those are the types of things that that you want to troubleshoot as far as the nighttime stuff, right? And then in the daytime, hey, when you're waking up, do you wake up without an alarm at around the same time? If that starts to happen, that is a key point that your circadian rhythm is very intact, right? If you're waking up within a half an hour of where you normally wake up pretty much year round, and year round meaning time relative, right? Because most people, yeah, for the season, correct, right? Because the sun will change enough that you will move your sleep-wake cycle by an hour or two, depending on the sunlight. But for summertime, hey, the whole summer, I woke up within half an hour of this time. In the winter, I woke up with, if those are happening, most likely your circadian rhythm is running very well. If those are not happening, then listening back to this specific episode is what you would want to do to troubleshoot and start lining those up. But yeah, those are right off the bat things that you would notice. For a male, another thing that you will notice, especially when it comes to sex hormone production, is waking up with an erection regularly. For females, it is just a sense of not having anxiety when going to bed. So in other words, if females don't have anxiety going to bed and they're falling to sleep really easily, but then waking up very much a lot throughout the night, that is a problem with the processes that happen at night. So that's where I would say, hey, let's look at cleaning up what's going on at night. And then the same thing in the morning. If they're waking up just not refreshed, not just really groggy, or they're waking up and they almost need a very large amount of stimulants, like, hey, I need like 2 or 3 or 4 cups of coffee every morning, and this goes for men and females, then that tells me that your cortisol has been shifted. It's no longer in the morning. It's either before or more than likely way in the afternoon, and you're needing a lot of stimulus to even get that activity going in the morning.
Yeah. No, these are awesome pointers. So a lot to take away from it, and we might expand on sleep cycles next time. Thank you for your time, David, as usual, and I'll speak to you in the next video.
Awesome. Thank you.